We are joined in studio by Muriel Bowser. She's a Democratic candidate for mayor of the District of Columbia. She's also a member of the D.C. Council who represents Ward 4. Councilmember Bowser, thank you
Well,
so much for joining us.
it's
Happy
my
New Year to
pleasure,
you.
and Happy New Year to you. And it's not new to you, but these digs are new to me. Congratulations. It's a beautiful new studio.
Thank you very much for that. As you know, Tom and I discuss a few topics before we get to the issue at hand, but if you feel like jumping in at any time, feel free to do so. Tom, I want to start in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where you once had a journalistic career. The new governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, has decided that his education secretary should be Ann Holton, particularly significant because not only is she the wife of former governor and now Senator Tim Kaine, she is the daughter of former Governor Linwood Holton, who made national news, maybe international news, by the desegregation of the public schools in Virginia and taking his two daughters to public school, holding them by the hand. Ann Holton is one of those daughters. She's now the education secretary for the Commonwealth.
It's certainly symbolic for all of those reasons, but also it shows that Terry McAuliffe, who has been a national player in national Democratic politics, is continuing what he tried to do since he lost the governor's race 4 years ago. He is putting himself deeply into the Virginia that people like and respect. And by appointing her, it's another sign that he is focused on Virginia, not any national campaign effort for Hillary Clinton or any of the other things that might occur going forward. He's trying to establish a firm establishment base, and that's what he's done.
Okay, we'll swing from Virginia to Maryland, where the school superintendent in Maryland was one of the candidates for school superintendent in New York, Joshua Starr. And it's been reported during the course of this week that Education Secretary Arnie Duncan, and according to the Washington Post, at least one other Education Department official, urged New York Mayor-elect Bill de Blasio, he of the one city of slogan, not to appoint Joshua Starr. Joshua Starr gained some publicity, some would say notoriety, by being critical of the education reforms that are espoused by the Obama administration.
Well, I think the superintendent said, "Stop the insanity." So I think that would be interpreted as critical. But I didn't really understand the story because in the Post story it talks about how he was discouraged. Duncan discouraged De Blasio from appointing him, but also says in the same story that he was offered the number 2 in command of the school system, and that he would be assured he could move up to be the chancellor of the schools after Carmen Farina, who's 70-something years old, was going to be just there a short time.
Turned that down, though.
But Kaya Henderson here was one of the people approached about that job.
Yeah, I knew she was consulted. Do you think she was approached?
Yeah, she acknowledged it. She spoke to, I can't remember who she spoke to, but yes, she acknowledged, and she put out a whole letter saying, "Thank you, but I'm not going."
Well, that would indicate,
Starr also put out a very nice note
that she is staying unless a new mayor happens to think differently. How would a Mayor Bowser deal with schools Chancellor Kaya Henderson? Does she stay or does she go?
Well, the schools, as you know, Coach, remains the number one issue on people's minds. And as we get across the city, and I don't say one city, I say across all 8 wards of the District of Columbia, that's what people want to know. How are we going to speed up school reform? How are we going to close the achievement gap? And what's the chancellor's plan? So I think we do have a good chancellor with good ideas, but like all the departments, I want to make sure that we have a leader that will move urgently and really close the gap for neighborhoods across the district.
Certainly in your Ward 4, on all sides of your Ward 4, the schools, the middle school concerns are just like off the charts. I know that ethics, an issue in ethics because of the federal investigation and the corruption that we've had, is right there. They're almost tied as number one issues, but clearly the parents want to know about the school boundaries that are going to be changing, about where their kids who might be very happy in the elementary schools, but the parents are just frankly concerned about middle school where discipline starts to break down.
People have to have confidence in the feeders. And so all the families that we're attracting to the District of Columbia will know they will only stay as long as they're confident in that feeder. So you're right. Our elementary schools, we're getting it right, but they want to know what's next. And so it's going to be very important that our DC public schools, our DC public charter schools, and our entire system be able to demonstrate to parents that we can get the job done in middle and high school as well.
Do you have any?
I guess I should start giving out the phone number now. 800-433-8850 is the number to call, because we have apparently now started our interview with Muriel Bowser.
Oh, I thought you had started.
800-433-8850 is the number to call. If you'd like to
all right.
join the conversation, you can send email to kojo@wamu.org. Fire away.
I was confused. I thought for a moment I was at Howard, but
Well, see, I started off confused, and now apparently you've caught it too.
try to remember my question.
It's contagious.
David Catania, who's openly exploring a run for mayor, is focusing on education. Tommy Wells, a Ward 6 council member, who says he wants a walkable school for every neighborhood. Jack Evans has said he's helped fund the reform of the school system. All of that. Do you have any specific ideas that you would direct Kaya Henderson to do, or are you just going to just give her more encouragement should you become mayor?
Our chief approach to this is replicating our #1 performing middle school, and that's Alice Deal. And when we go to Alice Deal, to me, it's really no silver bullet as to why it works. We have a great building, we have great staff and teachers, we have parents who are working hard to make sure the school is working. It's safe, and has a lot of extracurricular activities and the types of offerings that people want. How do we replicate that? And so what we will set out to do is form a 5 to 7 year plan that allows us to replicate Alice Deal across the city. I think we'll need at least an additional 5 locations.
Now I'd like to get to the fundamental question, and that is, who is Muriel Bowser? Just this morning I was at an event and I ran into a fellow Ward 4 resident, and he said to me, I would like to vote for Muriel Bowser for mayor, but I'm looking for a reason why, other than that I liked Adrian Fenty. She replaced Adrian Fenty. A lot of the people who chaired Fenty's campaign and advised Fenty when he was campaigning are in her campaign, but I'm looking for a reason. What accomplishments has Muriel Bowser had that would cause me to want to vote for her? Who is Muriel Bowser?
Well, I think that, and I'm glad you asked that question, and because I would really love to spend time today just explaining exactly that. And we have had huge accomplishments across our ward, and we've gone down to the council and passed common sense legislation. But more than that, I'm really a person who's committed to the city, a child of the city, and I think that a council member and a candidate who speaks to all 8 wards across the District of Columbia. People sometimes ask me what one of the things I'm most proud of, having been elected in Ward 4 for the last 6.5 years in 3 elections, and that's how we brought the ward together. So unlike a lot of members of the council, I represent a ward that straddles Rock Creek Park, that is a perfect microcosm of the city, and we've been able in 6.5 years to have the residents of Chevy Chase just as interested in what happens on Georgia Avenue as they are in what happens in Chevy Chase. When I was first elected, I had residents who live on the east side like I do in Riggs Park who didn't know how to get to Lafayette School and Chevy Chase, and we've managed to close that gap. I've been very proud of my work on ethics reform in the District of Columbia. We had one of the most contentious issues at a contentious time when you had 3 council members were under investigation, and you had a mayor who had all kinds of problems, and the public was looking
Still do.
Yes, but we're going to change that, and we're looking to some leadership from the council, and so a very difficult time. And a lot of people said, and maybe even you, Tom, well, Bowser, you got to do this, or Bowser, you got to do that. But we really held a course that put together a board of ethics and government accountability that's independent, has great people serving on it, and we charged them and we gave them the powers that they needed to get the job done. And we actually see that board working. And I think over the course of time, we're going to see a real difference in how in how officials and public employees act and respond and have a more open government.
Well, on that particular issue of campaign reform, one of the big issues is continues to be whether there should be corporate donations. And you came down on the side of continuing corporate donations. You have some in your current campaign. You've had them in other campaigns. There was a very strong effort to ban corporate donations. Tommy Wells of Ward 6 Council, he's not accepting them. His fundraising totals show it compared to you and Jack Evans and others. What about corporate donations? Why aren't those considered too powerful in city politics?
Well, what I think, Tom, is that there's going to be corporate money in all elections. Now, whether it comes in the form of a corporate check or an individual who's giving, what I think is important is that the people know who your contributors are. And I have supported and continue to support strong disclosure laws. I have supported and actually put government and taxpayer money behind making sure the Office of Campaign Finance has the auditors and investigators that they need to make sure everybody is following the rules. And that's what we're going to continue to do.
Mayor Gray has made it clear that he believes that for all the trouble with his campaign in 2010, that the city is doing very well and that he's offering voters a candidate who's proven that he can lead the city well. What would you be doing that you would say is significantly different as mayor right now? How would you say your vision of the city is different from what he has pursued these past 4 years?
Well, I think what people across the city are telling us is that they don't see a mayor that's focused or has offered a vision. What they've seen is kind of the continuation of the status quo. We have a mayor who inherited basically a steaming engine. And so what is different about what has happened in the last 3 years? So people want to know that we're getting our city ready for the future. And they frankly don't see that in the mayor and in a lot of department heads. How are we going to prepare for the 200,000 people that will move here in terms of our public transportation, our affordable housing, our schools? And so that's the plan that people want to see.
We got an email from Pam who says, I live in Tacoma, D.C. You have expressed support for a very large and tall building project at the Tacoma Metro Center. In fact, the proposed height of the building is way above zoning limits for that area and would dwarf the garden apartments and single-family homes that surround it. How do you justify your support for this proposed development?
Well, actually, that proposal is at the Metro Board, and there has been no final action on it. My efforts to this point have been to make sure that the development would be more in keeping with the surrounding community. In fact, some of the proposals started out much taller with many more units than what's currently on the table. And so there's been no final vote there.
Well, if it's at the Metro Board, you have a say, don't you?
I do have a
Because
say.
you're a representative on the board.
I am.
And your say is that you want to see changes in what's being proposed at this point?
There
or are you
already
satisfied?
have been changes in what has been proposed.
So it's smaller than what
It's
it was?
smaller. There's a floor that's is one less floor than what the original proposal was. I think there are 60 fewer units. And what's also significant about this is that there are two jurisdictions involved. While the Tacoma Metro Center is entirely in the District of Columbia, it's directly across the street from Maryland. And we've kind of been down the road with this project before. Many years ago, there was a different proposal made, and so now we're confronting this one. But let me just tell you what my approach to development projects is.
Allow me to interrupt for a
Sure.
second, because if you're just joining us, that's the voice of Muriel Bowser. She is a Democratic candidate for mayor of the District of Columbia. She's also a member of the D.C. Council who represents Ward 4. Also with us, of course, is Tom Sherwood. He is our resident analyst, a reporter at NBC4, and a columnist for the current newspapers. Our number is 800-433-8850. You can send email to kojo@wemu.org or send us a tweet at Kojo Show. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so we're just talking about development. I've had the honor of serving as the economic development chair just over a year now, actually. And so our approach in our ward, and so people ask you, why Muriel Bowser? We set out really a economic development agenda for Georgia Avenue, and you know how long people have been working on developing Georgia Avenue.
I was there with Bill Clinton in 1992.
Yes. So it was, I was
93.
never more happy. I was able to send a text to Adrian Fenty and to Charlene Jarvis just to say thank you for all the hard work that you've done to get us to the point where we have development over Petworth Metro. We have shopping at Georgia and Missouri. We're going to turn over Walter Reed. And I just call out these projects because we live in an area where it's not easy to develop. People have been trying for a long time. And as we get across the city in Ward 8, you ask, why haven't we seen that type of leadership, and why haven't we seen progress in a lot of areas? So that's one reason why I announced, some weeks ago that I would appoint a deputy mayor for the east of the river to really have to coordinate for economic development, education, and jobs. A real plan about how we change the trajectory for opportunity for a lot of people in our city. And that's going to be a big difference between the type of agenda that we're moving, what we see now, what some other people are talking about.
Some people criticize it as pandering to that part of town where you're less well known than you are. But on this overall development issue, some people are the discussion of the height limit, which has been before Congress. It's kind of been derailed somewhat by the National Capital Planning Commission for right now. But do you support bigger buildings in the city in designated areas, or where are you on the Height Act?
Well, I support Phil Mendelssohn's position. Now, write that down. I told him to write it down.
Goodness. That was an anti-home rule position.
Well, when we talk about autonomy and things that we need, it would be great if the Congress would talk about legislative autonomy and budget autonomy, the things that we've actually asked for. Nobody went to the Congress and said, well, maybe this administration did, and said, give us tall buildings. The fact of the matter is, and I couldn't agree with Phil more when he says that our skyline is in itself historic and is a treasure for the whole nation. And I think it's important that we protect that, and it should be
even in the outer reaches of Benning Road, New York Avenue, the St. E's development overlooking the city. I'm not proposing Roslyn or Crystal City, Lord help us.
Well, maybe you are.
No, I'm
if
not.
you change the Height Act, maybe that's exactly what you'll get. And I haven't heard anybody in Benning Road say that they want tall buildings. And in fact, let's not confuse ourselves and think that the fact that we don't have development in those areas is because people can't build tall buildings. And that's not the reason. So let's really deal with the reasons and give people the type of the development they want in their neighborhoods.
Would development include a Washington football team finance football stadium at RFK?
Who's going to finance it?
The team itself.
Well, we love our Washington football team, as you say. We would especially love a winning Washington football team in Washington.
Well, what about RFK? Would you at least consider? I mean, I know Mayor Williams, Mayor Fenty, Mayor Gray all have expressed interest with the Redskins organization. I'll say it since you didn't. That maybe in the future something could be worked out.
That would be an ideal site. Their neighbors, as you know,
right.
And I've talked to a lot of them that surround that site.
It would have to fit.
Like if we're not going to have the team back, then we need to start making some decisions about. And that's been a lot of frustration in Ward 6 that nothing has happened.
Here is Oscar in Washington, D.C. Oscar, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. Quick question. I don't really believe I heard whether or not Muriel Bowser, if you get elected mayor, you would continue and keep Kai Henderson as chancellor. And the second question.
Well, allow me to interrupt, Oscar. How important is that to you?
Well, it's very important because I'm a parent and I have a child right now who's going to be matriculating to middle school next year, and I'm concerned about education.
So you would like Chancellor Henderson to stay?
No, she needs to go. And the second thing that Muriel Bowser said was that she would like to replicate Alice Steele. But Alice Steele is a neighborhood school, and they only allow successful kids who are not within the neighborhood to come. Thirdly, since you've been councilwoman, what middle school have you used your influence as representative? What middle school in Ward 4 do we have that you've used your influence to improve so it would look like Alice Steele right now? I can't find
Okay, allow me to have her respond to
that. In Ward 4.
Okay.
Well, Oscar, my experience with Ward 4 middle schools is exactly why I've arrived at this position. We have, and I don't know how long you've lived in Ward 4, but basically the Ward 4 and the Ward 3 schools serve Ward 4. So we have a lot of students that are in Ward 3 schools. So, and I don't know the number off the top, but I would be willing to guess that a lot of the Alice Steele students are actually actually live and reside in Ward 4. We had the opportunity to combine our DC Public Middle School, DC Public Schools Middle School, with the new Roosevelt High School, which is what I proposed. Our DC Public Middle School, many parents just wouldn't choose it, and they hadn't been choosing it for many, many years. And I believed that it needed a fresh start, and it needed to be rebuilt in with the $100 million Roosevelt renovation. The chancellor decided not to do that, and I think it was a big mistake to not do that. We could have gotten a new high school and also a new middle school all at the same time. So what I have arrived at is that we're going to have to reopen McFarland and have a DC public school that is a by right school right in the community. More than that, I think, Oscar, that we have to explore some partnerships with our very successful public charter schools. And I think, it's my position that the public charter schools need to admit neighborhood kids as well. So neighborhood kids can go to their neighborhood public charter school. We have some very successful public charter middle schools in our ward, including Washington Latin, which we fought very hard to make sure that they had an appropriate facility right in Ward 4.
The feeling from some people, though, is if you make the charter schools accept whoever lives in the neighborhood, then they become public schools, not charter schools.
They are public schools. They are funded just like the public schools with our taxpayers. And now they are also in public school buildings.
So what's the attraction of charter schools? They don't have union teachers, or what? I mean, why are charter schools any better than the public, just funding public education?
Yeah, well, the charter schools are funding public education, and many of them are very good, and some of them are working to be better. And so we want to, I don't think that the charter schools would say you should choose us because we don't have to take Johnny from across the street. That certainly isn't I hope that wouldn't be their argument. I think that their mission, just like DC Public Schools, is to provide a quality education for children and families in the District of Columbia.
Speaking of that, I wasn't sure, did you say, I know if you were to be elected mayor, you wouldn't want to be pigeonholed right now on every appointee, every person who's serving in a position now, like police chief or fire chief or whatever.
But did you answer Oscar's question?
Yes, would you answer Oscar's question about Kaya Henderson?
I have made no commitments to keep Kaya Henderson, and I certainly have made no commitments to get rid of Kaya Henderson. I will tell you, I have some principles that are important to me, that we have a chancellor who has a plan for each section of the city, that we have a chancellor who will act urgently and be visible in the community and be the face of school change. And I do value consistency.
On now to Liz in Silver Spring, Maryland. Liz, your turn with Muriel Bowser.
Hi. I recently left Ward 4 for sunny Maryland, and before leaving, voted in favor of a referendum that would have given Washington, D.C., an independent elected attorney general. And I know that many of the would-be mayors have not supported the actual election of that person, and presumably because there aren't any good attorneys to run for the space in Washington, D.C. I'd like to know what Councilwoman Bowser's position on that would be as mayor.
Well, first I'd like to know, why the heck did you leave?
Walmart.
You left because of...
You moved closer to a Walmart?
Yeah, because there are a lot of Walmarts in Montgomery County.
Yeah, I was 4 blocks from the new one on Georgia Avenue.
And you didn't want to be that close to a Walmart?
Well, you weren't there, so okay. It wasn't the traffic I wanted. So anyhow, I'm in Maryland now, but nevertheless.
Okay, well, I just wanted to know why you moved.
Yes, but
how did you vote on that? Did you vote to postpone the election? I can't remember.
I did. I also voted to have an elected attorney general. And I will say that I think there is still a lot of work that we have to do at the council to make sure everybody understands what the roles of the independent attorney general will be. We have to be clear about what legal representation the mayor of the District of Columbia will have, and we will have an election for an independent AG.
But why is it that 42 states or whatever it is can have an elected attorney general? We like to think of ourselves as a state, but we can't have one. It took all this time. It's going to take 4 more years to have an elected attorney general?
I think it will, and because of, you know, how the charter change said, and I agree with this very wholeheartedly, that the AG and the mayor can't be elected in the same election. That's definitely not something that we want to happen.
Okay, can I very quickly, speaking of, you mentioned Phil Mendelssohn and the opposition to the changing of the Hyde Act and home rule issues and the Attorney General. And what about, I don't want to say his name because he didn't say I could use his name. He begged me to ask you about statehood and about what you would do as mayor, or have you ever done, to push statehood for the District of Columbia. We have a lot of ceremonial things that every mayor seems to have done at one point, and the mayor certainly talks about it now, but is it a realistic thing that the mayor of the city can pursue?
It drives me nuts, and it should everybody else, for us to kind of do the same thing over and over again. And this was never more clear to me than when we were all arrested in protest of these riders that had been added to our appropriations bill. And I just, well, it was 100 of us there where we could have hours and hours and hours down with the Capitol Police to talk about how we ended up here and what was going to be next. And I realized that the strategy was the same. And I do think that we've had some good approaches. A lot of good people have been working long and hard. I know DC Vote has been out there nationally talking about how we can advance our statehood position. I do think that we can advance in a incremental way. We have been never more clear than now than that we have to be separated from the federal budget. We're not a federal agency, so we need budget autonomy. We need legislative autonomy. And I think we just need to change our approach on the Hill. I've said that any time a big entity wants something from the Congress, what do? They make sure that their voices are heard every day. And we have a lot of federal issues. We have funding that we need for Metro. We need the Congress to give us parity. Let me throw this in for transit benefits, where if they lowered the transit benefit, but they have kept the parking benefit the same. We have bridges and roads. We have all of these issues with the federal government, including our need for legislative budget autonomy and statehood. So I would make sure we had a great lobbyist up there on the Hill for us that's talking about our issues every day with the Congress.
Would you personally be visiting the members of the Congress who are heads of the committees?
Absolutely.
And pushing the kinds of legislation that you feel you need?
Absolutely.
Mayor Gray seems to have a pretty good relationship with Darrell Issa, the congressman from California who oversees the plantation of the District of Columbia. Do you have any close relationships with any members of Congress now who are powerful?
Well,
even
I will
suburban
have
members of Congress.
Absolutely. When I stay in close contact with our friends from the jurisdictions. I serve on the Metro Board, and I serve on the Transportation Planning Board. So having those regional connections has been very important.
So backing up very quickly,
Sure.
so Mayor Sharon Pratt Kelly was arrested. Mayor Gray was arrested. Adrian Fenty led a march down Pennsylvania Avenue. I can't remember what Tony Williams did. But so you're thinking that kind of symbolic thing you would be less likely to do as opposed to more grinding work inside the Congress itself? Is that I hear the right? You're not going to be arrested again?
Well, I didn't have the intention of being arrested the first time, but my blood was literally boiling for, our own party basically served us up. So I can't promise that I don't get to the boiling point again, but I can promise that we're going to work strategically about coming up with a real strategy to make a difference in 4 years.
And here is McConan in Washington, D.C. McConan, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I would like to ask the council, are you going to be a better mayor or transportation better than the current mayor in terms of taxi driving? I'm a cab driver. We are taxpayers. We have been coming for a lot of change, but they're taking over our business. Taken over by Uber or ex-Uber, whatever private cars who don't pay tax, who are so expensive. And we have been, taking over our business. If you can't believe New Year Eve, we couldn't
McConan,
make
would you like the next mayor to just give Uber the boot?
Yes,
Okay, well, let's hear Muriel Bowser on that issue.
Well, if I could tell you the number of times that I hear this information from cab drivers, you'd be surprised. We're out every day across the city. We're out this morning on the corner of Martin Luther King and Good Hope Road, where taxi drivers are honking at us. They are not happy, and mostly I think they're not happy with what they feel as being overregulated. Now, we're a city that's growing. We have all kinds of transportation needs, and so we want to make sure that residents have options. Where we live in Ward 4, it's hard to get a cab. They don't come there. And so there have been other car sharing services and Uber, as you've mentioned, who've been able to fill that void, but they're also very expensive. As the government, what our policies have to do is make sure that we have taxi service all over the city, that it's affordable, and that it's safe. So that's going to be important. So what I would tell Makonnen is I want to make sure that while we have very little regulation on Uber or Lyft or these other services, and we have over-regulation on our cabs. I think that we have put a lot of burdens on our cabs that the other services just don't have. So we have to figure out what's actually necessary to keep residents safe and have taxi service all over the city.
If we were involved in deregulating the taxi cab industry, you think that would cause more taxi cab service in areas that now are bereft of taxi cab service, like some places in Ward 4 and a lot of places in Ward 7 and 8?
No, I don't. I think the answer to getting cabs all over the city is not necessarily to do with some of the regulations that have been recently passed.
Let's be specific then. The cab drivers, some of them, many don't care, but objected to being required to take credit cards. Do you think cab drivers should have a way to take plastic of some type rather than cash?
And it shouldn't have taken 2.5 years to happen.
Well, that's true.
And then once
that's one of the major complaints, and it's because they say they take the credit cards and they don't get paid right away.
Well,
it takes
you
too
would
long.
you would be upset if you didn't get paid
I know,
either.
but I'm just suggesting what changes have been made. Would you change the uniform color that the city now has? Just like the circulator, would you change the uniform color and let them be any kind of car? Would you change the 7-year limit on how old the cab can be before it has to be retired? I mean, where's the overregulation? The hotel industry loves these changes because they say all these people come from out of town.
I think
can't make sense of our crazy cab system.
Sure, what we have fought for certainly is that cabs be able to take credit cards. For I think just as long as I've been on the city council.
So where's the overregulation?
I think that if you look at what we have for cabs compared to what we have for the other car services, you will see that we require the cabs to do a lot of reporting. We require the cabs to have their monies collected centrally. We require the cabs to show us all the trips. So we require a lot of the cabs.
That's what Uber does
so
anyway.
What we want for them, we want it to be balanced.
Well, that's what Uber does as a business policy.
They don't, but they do not show one ride from point to point, and I frankly don't think the government needs to know that.
On to Gideon in Washington, D.C. Hi, Gideon. Gideon is not hearing me, or I'm not hearing Gideon. Gideon, are you there?
There he is.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well.
I am a D.C. native, and I am also blue collar. I'm currently talking to you walking in the snow, doing my job. And it seems to me that all the development is really focused on this kind of transient crowd that comes in to the city, which has always been the case for Washington, D.C. But my question is, what are you going to do to preserve community and not just build all these condos? Because it seems like all the neighborhoods that I've lived in the past, the lower income blue collar people have been forced out for like higher rent and more of a crowd that appeals to bars with flat screen TVs. So I'd like to know what you do to preserve community in the city.
Well, we've heard so you talked about corruption in schools. Another big theme that we hear across the city is how do we have very intentional policies to grow our middle class? And people are very concerned that, yes, we love to see the new development. Yes, we love new restaurants. But if this city becomes so expensive, I can't afford to live here, what's the point? We heard from Gideon, but we can hear hear that in every ward across
So
the
what's
district
the
of
answer?
of Columbia. And so the answer is yes, we continue to develop, but we do have to be more intentional about our affordable housing policies. There's no mayor that's going to be able to tell you that he can lower the rent or she can lower the rent. But what we have to be able to do is look at our affordable housing policies, create more, of course, is one bucket. How do we preserve more? And so this is part of, I think, what Gideon is talking about when we
Do you
go.
have specific proposals about how we preserve affordable housing
For
and how
example,
we
Mayor Gray says
expand?
there's $187 million to leverage to improve or create more affordable housing.
Absolutely, and a lot of that money, of course, has been has been budgeted for many years. And so, in my ward, for example, and this is the case across the city, where we have units that are affordable, they're privately owned, but they're falling down often. So we have to make sure that part of that $100 million commitment, which I will maintain, is going to preserve affordable units. Now, nobody likes to talk about the third bucket that
And you only have a minute to talk
that
about
goes into the affordable housing policies. Is we have to work with our residents to afford more of the housing that's being created, and so that's why we have to have real job training and get people in jobs, good middle income jobs, so that we can continue to afford a ever expensive city.
Back to keeping
Muriel
the middle
Bowser.
class.
She is a Democratic candidate for mayor of the District of Columbia. She's also a member of the D.C. Council, and she represents Ward 4. And if after these last 40 minutes or so you still don't know who she is, then blame Tom Sherwood. Muriel Bowser, thank you very much for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Thank you, Kojo.